chance in society for success to change, but we give them that chance for success. That's why we're proud to present the model that this House would substantially impose substantial mandatory quotas for those hiring non-design individuals for large corporations. So, what does this actually mean? We're going to define this through our model, which is this House is all Western liberal democracies, and our model is that this substantial quota will impose all large companies who have over 200 workers will need to impose mandatory quotas of over 20%, of at least 20% who are non-design. Non-design individuals would be people who have no previous exposure to genetic modification. This is extremely important for 3 reasons. We have 3 burdens to prove to you. First of all, that we have a government obligation to protect those most vulnerable. Secondly, we improve the workplace interactions that exist. And thirdly, we create a change through political action that we only get on our side. If we prove these 3 to you, we've won today's debate. First of all, let's go into our 3 constructives to prove that. First, 1, government obligation, 2, the workplace benefits, and thirdly, political change. So, let's get into the first idea, which is government obligation. We tell you in a world where genetic engineering is so widely used, it's likely going to create an inequality that exists. We say unlike historical situations in the past, like racism, where it's based off prejudices about people just thinking it may exist, this actually does exist. They have different mental capabilities and different physical capabilities. So they're much more likely to be discriminatory because this clear distinction exists. We think, furthermore, there's a clear incentive because they have an inability to reap the same mental benefits and the same physical benefits. So in things when we regard such as like employment, specifically in this case, we think there's a large amount of discrimination that exists. Because even if someone has worked their entire life, right, has like extremely high qualifications, they seem to like they're just physically and mentally incapable of performing that job to the same level. That's why a certain level of discrimination will take place and still exist, regardless of the actual qualifications of the individual. We think the largest group affected in this specific resolution are going to be some of the poorest individuals because they'll have the least access to this widely used genetic modification. We think in the world, when you're born into a situation where you don't have economic advantage and you're born into a situation where you didn't consent to not being designed, we think at this point, we create a situation where these people are subject to a lot of discrimination and a lot worse opportunities for the rest of their life. We think because of this huge disadvantage that clearly exists, we as a government have an obligation to socially engineer society and create a situation where these people who are the most vulnerable actually get the protection and the help from the aid they need from the government. Otherwise, because no one else in society is willing to help them, we as a government need to step in and give them a hand up. And that's why the only way to destroy inequality and to create some sort of like incentive to stay non-design and to dispel discrimination will need to be through government obligation to step in. But now, let's actually go into this second idea, which is the workplace benefits that exist. So once the government actually imposes these quotas, what will happen? We think, first of all, there's a perceptual change because we finally create a situation where these individuals are no longer seen as worse their whole lives, right? They always see themselves as like, everyone sees them as not getting the job that they deserve, as seeing like as people who just systematically can't get these jobs or can't be successful. At this point, they're very like largely discriminated because it confirms the biases that currently exist. We say it's much more easy to discriminate against people who are now on the fringes of society, who the only perception you get of them are scroungers leeching off the government and taking their welfare. We think at this point, you create a situation where most individuals vilify the non-designed individuals as people who aren't worthy or deserving of the same attitudes. Now, we think what we change on our side, is that at this point we create a narrative in the workplace where we not get the same interaction with others. Though initial distrust will exist, we believe, we think at some point when people are working alongside you in the same projects in the same way, we think you'll finally realize and dispel the misconception about them being incompetent or incapable. How would you agree?
If I am genetically better than someone else, in what way will I not have confirmation bias when I see them do work less efficiently than I do?
So we think someone who has qualifications and has been working their entire life to get that situation, furthermore, would probably be able to have some sort of ability to meet those same standards. But even if they were somehow worse, we think individuals will finally realize, at this point, you're currently discriminating against them because you can't actually get a proper image of them. But we think when they're actually sitting beside you and working with you, regardless of their competency, we think, furthermore, this actually begins to humanize them. We give the example of the past with the Canadian barracks. The first time where they actually worked together, black and white men, they came together, and this dispelled racial boundaries that existed because they worked together on a common goal and a common cause, regardless of their training ability. And we see this first time is like we're more likely to get these individuals into positions of power and promotion. So you no longer see them as people who are scrounging off the worst in society. You begin to dispel that sort of discrimination. I think employer discrimination is now dispelled because now that you see these people are actually able to do the proper jobs and still able to use their qualifications that to meet the requirements of that job, they're now more likely to hire them and go past the quotas, do more things to actually get these people involved. But we think even at the point, but that they're going to be worse for work, we as a government always employ certain regulations and standards, and we don't think we don't think employers are going to discriminate against them. Instead, they're going to create the most accepting environments because they have an incentivization to create the most friendly environments to have the most incentivization for better profits. At this point, employers are going to try and dispel a lot of the issues that exist within the workplace and get people to work together and work along, and that will create more mutual benefits. But we think the final issue is political change. Now, even if you don't buy the way that people's perceptual change will exist, we think people now have more power when they have affirmative action. Because we believe this will be a catalyst to actually getting better jobs, better political positions, because you now actually see them as people who are more competent and more able to make rational decisions and to lead a community. We give the example, first of all, of inspiring a nation. We say Obama, who's worked through affirmative action to get through this stage, which was only introduced after affirmative action came to the workplace, allowed people to finally see look, everyone had been saying I couldn't succeed my entire life, but finally I got into a position and this man is leading the country, doing amazing things. It becomes an inspiration, a vehicle, and a catalyst for people to actually change and dispel the misconceptions that exist. It gives them some sort of motivation where none existed before. We think more importantly, they're more likely to get into political positions to change policy at this point. So, this is especially important because we give you an example of Sonia Sotomayor, a Supreme Court justice who was finally given through affirmative action the ability to change policy and to lobby for less discriminatory policies against minorities, specifically women and blacks. At this point, we get the political change that we need because people are finally incentivized to get these people into office and to get the affirmative action that they need. We think you're less likely to have discriminatory policies in the workplace and less likely to have systemic injustice, for example, with things like police brutality and throughout the system in general. Because on our side, we protect the most vulnerable through the government, we give them a chance at success, and we finally create the change that they need. We're so proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, member, for those remarks, and after
we are doing now, by the way. For staff report.
keep quiet, please. All right.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and honorable members of the panel. We see a world in which there are some babies who can be designed, some babies who will have fundamental biological superiority to all other babies. This makes this a very different case from feminist affirmative action or racial affirmative action. This is why. Because when there is a black man and a white man, they in fact do have equal ability. However, I perceive the black man as inferior. However, in this particular scenario, there is actually an inferiority, a biological inferiority of those who are not designed. What does this mean? It means that when you adopt them into the workplace, you are going to see more discrimination because you are going to see them acting actually inferior, and you are going to grow the stereotype that these people should not be regular. Secondly, we see that they are not going to be promoted. Madam Speaker, to win this debate to you today, we have to prove two things. Firstly, that you are going to see more discrimination against these people on their side of the house. And secondly, that meritocracy is essential to a society. Firstly, I will be going through my constructive and then refuting what we hear at Aaqib. Firstly, we say that the nature of a corporation is a for-profit corporation. Why is this so fundamentally important? Because ultimately, every corporation has to be profitable. Every corporation is concerned above everything else about their revenue and their bottom line, which means that corporations want the best workers. What is different, however, from cases of feminism or racial inequality is that in this case, there are biological reasons, such as physical and mental genetics, whereas non-designed babies are actually inferior. What this means, Madam Speaker, is that when we adopt these people into corporations, they're not going to be able to work as hard, as fast, or have the same output as people who have been designed because of these biological factors. Why is this so fundamentally bad? Because when businesses see them as people who are not able to output as much, who are not able to boost their revenue, and are only a drag on their system, they will not like them. This, Madam Speaker, is fundamentally important because corporations do a lot of good things. We see corporations being the ones who are, for instance, inventing the internet or providing us with energy. And it is important that corporations maintain their revenue while being able to do good things for society. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, we see that for these people who are not designed, they're not going to be able to be promoted, as said government says, because they're going to be inferior. And this quota only mandates that these companies keep them on their payroll. What this means, Madam Speaker, is because they are inferior, they're going to be placed in these minimum wage jobs for eternity. And this is going to further the income gap, not help it. Why is this, Madam Speaker? Because the meritocracy works in a corporation the way it works in the rest of society. Whoever is best suited to fill a job is going to fill it. And if a corporation only has to keep these workers on their mandate, they're going to be promoting the genetically superior ones to these roles, especially when we see this further discriminatory attitude against these babies. Yes?
Okay, so your solution is to give them no job, so instead people see them as leeches of the state, just taking taxpayers' money?
No, Madam Speaker. We say that under your side of the House, we see them as leeches of the state. Why is this? Because they are only hired in the first place because governments mandate that they be hired. Whereas under our side of the House, we think that we aren't going to have this whole discriminatory attitude. They are going to be seen as leeching off of corporations. For those who are meritocratically best suited to take these positions will take them. And we think that because genes in general are not equal, we are going to have some non-designer babies who are very capable of taking these positions, of becoming president, of, for instance, becoming the CEO of a corporation, and this is how we are truly going to end this discrimination. Why is this, Madam Speaker? Because in America and every other Western liberal democracy, there's a belief in the American dream. There's a belief that we are all equal. This is fundamentally important because if we believe truly that we are all equal and we are promoting these non-designer babies to these positions, people will not like it. Those who are designed will feel that they are fundamentally disadvantaged to get these positions and therefore will hate or discriminate against those who have not been designed and have been promoted due to this affirmative action policy. This means, Madam Speaker, that fundamentally the people who are running the company, who are more likely to be designed because they do have more merits, because they do have biological advantages, both physically and mentally, will be the ones running the company. So it is more likely that if they dislike the people who are non-designed, if they dislike the people who are only hired because of affirmative action, then they're less likely to promote them to positions of power. Because when you grow this dislike, you grow this hatred, whether it be against race or sex or non-designed babies, you fundamentally do not like that group. And that means that you're going to see them as a leech on your corporation. You're going to see them as draining your bottom line. There's no incentive whatsoever to promote them to executive positions. Secondly, Madam Speaker, we see that this is going to further the cycle of poverty. Why is this? Because under the status quo, we recognize that not all non-designer babies are going to be able to advance. But we think that there are systems in the American dream to allow these non-designer babies to get educations, to work harder, and to advance into executive positions. We don't believe, Madam Speaker, that it is at the lowest level of society, the lowest level of the pyramid, that we need equal representation. We think that it is all throughout the pyramid. And we think, Madam Speaker, while it may take more time to eventually see executives be designer and non-designer babies, we think that under our side of the House, when you don't get this discrimination, you don't get this hatred of non-designer babies, we think that you are more likely to be willing to promote them on meritocratic basis, in which case you will see that if this non-designer baby actually has the ability to become CEO of a company, despite all of his biological fundamental disadvantages, there clearly is capability within these non-designer babies. We think that it is when you further these thought patterns that you actually end discrimination. Madam Speaker, we don't believe that simply forcing everyone into minimum wage jobs and having equality at the bottom of the pyramid is the best way to do this. We hear from side of government about these workplace benefits. We hear that these people will be seen as leeches on the system, but when we give them positions in corporation, they will be liked. But we don't think that this is fundamentally true. Why is this? Because government, yes, does have a responsibility to take care of those who are disadvantaged. And we think, Madam Speaker, that when government takes care of them by providing them with welfare, it is very different than when a corporation does so. When a corporation does so, their interest is not to have the best interests of the people at hand. The interest of a corporation is to produce a profit, which means corporate executives will have a further disdain for these non-designer babies than governmental officials. Yes, we currently pay welfare as a government, but a corporation does not pay welfare. When a corporation is forced to keep these inefficient workers, there's going to grow this disdain. So we don't think that we're going to in any way perceptually change the way that these non-designer babies are perceived. We think, Madam Speaker, that if anything, we're going to continue to grow this hatred, and that is fundamentally wrong. Secondly, Madam Speaker, we say that we cannot eliminate this perpetuality of inferiority under their mechanism. Why is this? Because if they are only there because they are forced to be there, no one will believe that they have any merit. This is the case with every affirmative action policy, but especially this case. Because yes, affirmative action can work for instance, the feminist movement, because once women get there, they're able to perform. But we say that especially in this case, when they aren't able to perform, what you end up getting, Madam Speaker, is a fundamental belief that these people are not able to perform and they should not be given these jobs in the future. Because, Madam Speaker, their policy only furthers discrimination, and because their policy furthers the income gap and prevents non-designer babies from becoming the top leaders in their countries, we beg to oppose.
When they actually work for them.
Honorable Speaker, what we need is freedom from discrimination, not freedom for discrimination. Something that our side really stands for is perceptual change, tangible change, and real change, right? I have a really big problem with side opposition as they say, okay, they're not going to have good jobs, so we're going to give them no jobs, right? What we're ready to tell you on our side is how these people can still climb up and tell how these people are going to be running, going to have big positions either way. We're going to go through thorough reconstruction of my partner's strongly untouched points with one line of refutation. And then we're going to go through thorough refutation of their side. Okay. So firstly, let's go into refutation. What they tell you is this case is very different from feminism and racism because of scientific inferiority. And we concede to that because we agree that this means that there's going to be even more discrimination, right? That's why we need to give them these jobs, right? This is why they have this negative stigma around them. So whenever they apply to get a job, whenever they apply to rent a house or get a car, they're no longer given that opportunity. We think that's particularly harmful. In the first point, they talk about these companies need to be for profit. But we have several responses to this. We tell you, firstly, we understand that they need to be for profit, but they still need to follow certain standards that we put on them. We think that's currently consistent with the status quo. We feel that these jobs and these employers are social actors. These are social fields that influence society. When you don't pick someone because of the way they were born, we think that it's the more discrimination in society. That's something that we need to expel out of our system. We don't want that discrimination. Okay? Okay. So then they go on to talk about how it's going to drag on them. What's going to happen is these people are going to be bullied in their jobs. What we have to say is that we tell you now these people are in close proximity. Under the status quo, these people, it's very easy to discriminate against someone who isn't in the room. But now when they're in the room, it humanizes them and they become real. Ethan, sit down, your seat is getting cold. Alright. So Alright. Now they talk about how they're going to get bad jobs, right? Firstly, we tell you it's better than them having no job, right? But secondly, we tell you this isn't particularly true because now these people prove themselves when they get into these fields, right? And they gain more political capital, as my partner discussed, which I'm going to rebuild upon. What's up?
Madam Speaker, the disabled don't currently have no jobs. They have less jobs across the entire spectrum. Can you please explain to me why?
We think that they gain more jobs and they gain more perceptual change under our side of the resolution. They get more tangible change, right? This perceptual harm that they say doesn't really it weighed to the tangible gains that they have on our side. It doesn't really it's not as relevant, right? But we tell you finally, these people didn't consent to be born this way. They didn't consent to be this way, right? So this whole meritocracy point completely falls apart. We don't think that's true. Later on, they go on to add about poverty, right? And then here they make the biggest contradiction of their case here they talk about like the thing that like makes them lose today's round. They tell you, they come up here and say, these people are inferior and they can never get these jobs, right? But then they turn around and contradict themselves. It's like, okay, if we don't implement this, they're gonna become like the next CEOs, right? What we need is like a real change. They offered us no alternatives on their side of the case. They offered us no solution. All they said was welfare. We're gonna refute that in Reconstruction. Okay, so let's go into Reconstruction on my partner's first point. My partner's first point was an obligation to protect. What did we hear? The only thing we heard in refutation on their side is that we concede that we need to help vulnerable individuals, so we give them welfare. What I told you is that these people need a hand up, not a hand out. It's better that these people have job opportunities, right? Because if you give a man like money for a day, he can feed his family. But when you give him a job, like he can feed his family for the rest of his life. We think it's really important. But like now it has this perceptual change, right? Because now they become less leeches off the system, because now it shows the society that these people are actually working for the dollar, not just sucking up your tax dollars. That's like really important, right? These people actually seem like they're worth something, right? Now let's extrapolate on top of my partner's point. Tell you, when you exclude them from society, what happens? They no longer have a job. We tell you, what happens is now they no longer able to contribute to society, so they're more likely to like go into crimes, more likely to go into depression and kill themselves. We think that's really like harmful, right? We think that like something that's really harmful. Okay. Alright. So we think it's really harmful that you push these people out of society, because now like what happens is that you no longer have these people who are really important. We think it's really important that you have different people in society. It's because difference is what makes human beings inherently special, and we think that's something that we value in society. The greatest artists and greatest authors of all time were different. We don't think we should just exclude them out of society. We value them in our companies. We need them in our companies. Okay? I don't think that's really funny. Second point, we're going to talk about tangible change. They gave us no response to this. I'm still going to extrapolate on it. What we tell you is now, this is the difference between them getting that education, getting that job, and getting that new home. We think that's particularly important because there's this negative stigma proven by this information. These people no longer have controls over their lives. They no longer feel like they're accepted in society. Now, these people will go into these fields and prove themselves when they take up these jobs. And when these people see that these people are capable, these people aren't just like quadriplegics that are like handicapped, we think now these people understand that these people are worth something. They're really important. Now, let's go into like political change. This is like, they didn't touch upon this, but we're still going to extrapolate upon this. This is like one of my partner's most important points. We tell you, now, when you put these people in the workforce, it leads to less discrimination because it humanizes them. Like the example he brought up, like the Canadian brought, it shows that these people are worth something. Now they get less discrimination and more support. Now people are going to hire these people whether or not we have this quota in place. That's really important, right? Now that they have this more support, now more voters and more people are going to vote for legislations that like helps these people. You get more support supporting their cause. You get better like lives for these people, right? But the most important thing is now these people are empowered. Like my partner brings up the Obama example, right? Under the status quo, a lot of like African Americans feel like they're worthless, feel like they can't achieve great things. But you have an example like Obama who empowers them and says it doesn't matter how you were born, if you try, you can make it. That's something that you only get on our side of the house, right? That's something that we think that's particularly important. We think that like now these people are like empowered to make change in society, to go for that job. They're actually able to like stimulate change. We think that's really important. So what have we talked about over the course of our speech? What I've done is I went through thorough refutation on how, firstly, now these people who buy these companies, although they should be allowed to make profits, social change and making sure these people live better lives is always more important than like these company business leaders making like $2 less off like their millions, right? Secondly, we told you why they make this really big contradiction where they say they can't make it, but then they turn around and say, like, without this, like, they're going to become CEOs. We don't see any solution that's given by their side. Then we go into thorough reconstruction, and we tell you through our reconstruction why we have the obligation to protect vulnerable individuals in society, why you create tangible change and political change, and that's why we're the only side who gave you real change. Thank you.
Ethan's notes are too sick for the podium.
Alright. Hello, you're doing 7
Madam Speaker, let's say I was genetically modified and I am better than literally every debater to have ever lived. Let's say there was something that was modified with me the day that I was conceived that made me literally God when it came to debating. And I was then told to sit beside someone every single day who is inferior, who isn't made better at debate. Every single day I have to watch them attempt to debate and I will never see them improve to my level. At what point will I think that they are my equal? At what point will I think that they are able to debate at my level? At what point will I think that they are every much my equal and deserve my help? I will not think this. If I am forced to sit beside them every single day of my existence, I will never want to help them. They are wasting my time. They are draining my energy. I will never want to help them. I beg you. First, he tells us that the government has an obligation to the people. Yes, they absolutely do. But we have an obligation to ensure that they have the opportunity to succeed, right? What we hear from them is that, like, okay, well, it's not like racism because there's a clear distinction. Yes, absolutely. That's where their case falls. There is a clear distinction in between everything that happens, right? This isn't to say we're all just different colors of skin or different genders, and that's why there's discrimination. No, I am literally better than you. I don't know how much clearer we can put this in the context of this debate, right? So we tell you that when we put these people in positions that they do not deserve, we really aren't helping out the people. Here's why. Because when we tell you that you're only in this job for the reason being that you are worse, when you're only in this job because there is literally nothing else you are physically able to do, we tell you that there is no opportunity for them to grow. As Zeus mentions, they're just going to be stuck in this system, never being able to change. I fail to see how it is that this benefits them, right? At best, like Aaqib and Erphon keep telling us that no job is better than any job. Like if any job is better than no job, and that like they'll just be leeches of the state. Here's the thing, right? I think we'll feel somewhat bad for these people who aren't genetically modified. However, if I'm forced to sit beside them every day, I'll hate them. If they take my job, even though I'm better than them, I'll certainly hate them, right? I don't think that this really implies this, I don't think this helps this obligation. Secondly, what do we hear from Aaqib? He tells us about these workplace benefits. This is really like where I want to take down their case, because I think this is what they crux a lot of it on. That we'll start normalizing people, and that like we change racist views because of this, right? Here's the thing, right? We tell you that meritocracy is incredibly important, right? We tell you that if you're not seen as the best, most capable person for your job, we will not normalize it, right? This is different from racism, as they point out. I am better than you. I am better than you in the way I was born in this instance, right? We tell you that this only has confirmation bias. I point this out in a POI. It goes uncontested, really. If I sit beside you every day, see you doing my work worse, see you taking the job of my friend and doing his job worse, I see you being a strain on this company because every day you're being yelled at by the boss because you're incompetent and don't exactly know what you're doing, I'm not going to sit there thinking, well, you know what? That's normal, you know? That's just the way of life. I'm not going to think, you know what? You're just as good as me even though you're messing up literally every time you do something. No, it's going to confirm my bias. It's going to confirm my bias that these people are worse than I am. It's going to confirm my bias that these people are never going to be at my level. And this only worsens discrimination, right? We tell you that when we confirm the biases that people are worse than us by forcing them to sit beside us every day, you only increase the amount of animosity we have between them, right? We tell you that when you only see people as lesser than I am, and you just confirm that they are lesser than us, I'm never going to grow to accept them, right? This is the distinction, right? It's because I'm biologically better than them. It's not like racism where I could sit beside a black guy or a woman and say after a while, you know what? Actually, they're equally as good as me. This is me literally outperforming you every single time we meet each other. At no point will I normalize this. Thirdly, they talk about how like this was changed by racism, right? This is very much inconsistent with their case when they point out that this is different from racism because of biological methods. I just wanted to point that out. Thirdly, what do we hear from Aaqib? He talks about how this becomes a catalyst to change and allows more people to actually support them and more people to become president. And also, like, I was going to do this in rebuilding, but I think I'll address this now. They try pointing out a contradiction in our case. So lots of things I'm going to do here. Firstly, we tell you that this doesn't allow more people to become catalysts for change. Why? Because as Zeus points out, these people are going to be stuck in this system. These people are only going to be given the most low-paying jobs because at no point do we hear that there's any incentive for these companies to move them up the corporate ladder, right? It's even logical. They won't move them up. Who would you take, the better worker or the worse worker to move them up the level? I just have to have the worst worker on my payroll, right? It would make sense that I'm going to take the better worker higher up the level. So why doesn't this allow for a catalyst to change, right? Because if I know that the only reason you're in office, the only reason you're in politics, the only reason you're doing anything of any amount of importance is because you're forced to be there. Because you're literally there because we told you to be there under no other circumstance, we tell you that it doesn't allow people to be catalysts to change when they themselves even understand this, right? We tell you furthermore that like we won't actually want to support these people because I will hate them, right? I'll hate everything that they represent, right? We tell you this is even true in affirmative action cases here in the United States, right? In Texas, there's a large amount of white people who are hating African American people more because they see as African American people stealing their spots in universities, even if that is even if it's based on merit. We tell you that when you have these affirmative action plans, you only allow hate to grow. So we tell you that we won't have more support for these people if I'm simply seeing them as my lesser, I'm simply seeing them as worse. Furthermore, we tell you that maybe we'll just feel bad for them, right? That's just a random thought I'm having about this. Maybe we'll just think that we'll feel bad for them because there was nothing that they could do to be better than I am, right? We think that realistically, they don't prove to us why it is that I'm gonna have such an empathetic heart and want to change it for them. Yes?
Aren't you strawmanning the case when you make non-developed humans sound like toddlers?
Here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. First of all, they are toddlers. I am better than them. If I am smarter than you are, more athletic than you are, stronger than you are, more capable than you are, maybe you're not a literal toddler, but I'm certainly more developed than you are. Though I wanted to rebuild on my partner's very much, in my very much untouched case. Firstly, we tell you that this is we talk about the corporations, how this doesn't allow people to move up. They refute this by saying that they need to follow the law and they're social actors. No, they're not. They only care about their bottom line. They don't have to be social actors. Even if they are social actors, they don't tell us that there's any incentive for these people to move up. So realistically, we're not really helping these people more, especially if they suffer more discrimination. Secondly, they refute our point about how there's going to be more to workplace discrimination by simply saying if I sit next to them, I'll learn to be them. I hope I refuted that enough. Then when we talk about meritocracy, they literally don't refute this. Right? We tell you meritocracy is incredibly important because if I'm able to see that someone who's not genetically modified is then able to get into a power position, then I'm going to be able to respect not genetically modified people, not if they're forced into these situations. I get
Order!
Alright.
Madam Speaker, two themes that we saw in this debate. Firstly, do corporations have an obligation to do this? And secondly, how do we end discrimination? We think that both are better on our side of the house. Firstly, do corporations have an obligation to do so? We say no. Why is this? Because corporations are concerned with their profit. That is their primary goal, as I said in my first speech. While governments are concerned with helping people achieve justice and helping achieve fairness in life. Why is that important? Because while corporations will look for the most meritocratic people and look for the most competitive employees, the government will actually look to help those in need of it. The importance in this is that corporate heads and corporate executives will see these non-genetically modified people as inferior. The importance in this is that if they are operating on a meritocracy and are forced to not do so, they're going to grow to hate these non-genetically modified individuals. And as Ethan tells you, this means that we will not be seeing non-designer babies becoming CEOs, executives, much less presidents. On their side of the house, you see this insanity about how we're going to just be promoting people because we have to. We have to have 20% staff. Those 20% staff can be janitors. They can be the people who take care of us, while all of the executives are designer babies. This in no way helps to end the cycle of poverty. Secondly, how do we end discrimination? They bring us the example of Barack Obama, so I would like to analyze this. Why do we respect Barack Obama, and why do we believe that Ben Carson and other African Americans can be president? Firstly, we see him exceeding on his merits. He beat the odds, he went to Harvard, he wrote a book to pay off his debts, and despite being an African American, less than 40 years after Martin Luther King, he was able to become president. He won on his merits. As president, he has done incredible things. He has arguably been one of the better presidents in recent history. He withdrew America from Afghanistan.